Welcome to the Quick 10 podcast, brought to you by Trac, focusing on all things FedCon and cyber defense from different perspectives and different personalities, all in 10-ish minutes. Here's your host, Derek White.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Quick 10 podcast. I am your host, Derek White with Trac. And today I am joined by Bryan Rosensteel, which is one of the greatest names we're ever going to have on this podcast, who is the head of public sector product marketing management at Wiz. Bryan, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Yeah, this is going to be a great topic. And for those that are here for the first time, please subscribe for future episodes. You can find this podcast on just about every platform out there, also on YouTube as well. But we do also post all of the video recordings of this podcast on our website. So you can go to www.quicktrac.com, look for the podcast page. I believe it's in our Knowledge Center area. And you can see all the past and all the upcoming episodes as we get through season 2. So here we are, Bryan. We go back years now that I think about that. I mean, I don't even know. It's probably 6-7 years back to some of our previous lives. But today we're going to get into Cloud Native Application Protection Platform, or CNAPP. And so we're going to make the assumption here that most people listening today don't know exactly what that is and what Wiz is all about. So can you spend just a couple minutes quick on what that means, and then we'll get into some more juicier questions after that.
Yeah, it's always worth defining what a CNAPP is, right? And part of that is because it's just such a new technology, such a new term. There only recently has gotten market consolidation on calling this type of technology a CNAPP. So, long and short, without going too much into it, really what it is it's a native consolidation of what were previously siloed tools. So if we, roll back the clock and look at the way we used to do security, we had something that would scan for vulnerabilities, something that would scan for malware, something that would scan against, maybe a CIS benchmark or baseline. We'd have something that was looking for exposed secrets, another thing for looking for excessive admin credentials, right? A whole host of things. And you had other technologies for getting a software bill of materials, being able to see what are the network pathways out to public exposure, et cetera, et cetera. All of these tools and other things that I won't get into for sake of time are actually what are embedded inside a good modern kind of robust CNAPP, right? That cloud native application protection platform. Just think of it as trying to take all of these previously, point solutions and bringing them into a cohesive kind of back-end graph database to where then you can start seeing the context of how all these different things connect together. And the best way that I can think to summarize it, if you look at the difference between doing traditional point scanning and using a CNAPP, traditional point scanning, you would have an agent that you would deploy. It would be on, let's say, a VM, and it would tell you what admin credentials are there, what databases you connect to, et cetera. And you can print that off as a list, and you can look for issues. In a CNAPP, it's not only going to do it, now, one, it's going to do it from an agentless standpoint, so it's far more cost effective, where we're not having to deploy resources out into that customer cloud environment. But also, it's going to look at not only what that machine is configured to connect to, but what the other things that connect to that machine also connect to themselves. Classic example, that one admin credential. Well, that admin credential access rights over to a different database. So the reality is that VM connects to more databases than what you would ever see if you were only looking at the configuration. So that's like as fast as I can put it, but that's the reality of what CNAPPs do. Is they really bring together the visibility and context into a cohesive kind of single unified platform where you can look at a dashboard and you can see previously siloed elements that are actually connected together, not just separate visualizations on the same screen with no ability to cross communicate.
No, that's I mean, the cloud cloud world's so different than it used to be, right? Back then, even half of what you just said is just that's a new language for some people, but it's critical as the world continues to evolve and the technologies continue to evolve. So for this podcast, typically it's not always related to the CMMC ecosystem in the world, but we don't always have people who solve specific problems with specific tools on. But we do. We bring different perspectives from all over, and this is a relatively, I'll call it, new technology to this space, and it's not for everybody, but it's important to everybody. So let's get into a little bit more of the CMMC perspective. How does CNAPP fit into the CMMC world, specifically when it comes to that audit time and what
Right.
that means to a customer or maybe a partner who's helping them with this?
Right, right. Yeah. And of course the classic thing that everyone is looking for is, you know, can I buy this and will it give me CMMC, right? Will it give me compliance? And the reality is always no for, I don't care whatever it is that you're trying to purchase. It's not just going to give you the audit. What you have
Mm-hmm.
to think about is what does it take to pass those audits? And what is the majority of the time in order to go through it? Well, I think back to my days when I was actually, supporting the government in a more direct capacity. The majority of the time is actually in the collecting of information and then piecing together again because we didn't have a really nice way of actually automating the collection of everything and then actually being able to show how it relates together. We would have to go and we'd have to scan individual systems. We'd have to bring those scans together. Then we would have to look at, okay, well, what systems are connected to through network pathways to what else, right? All of this was Excel spreadsheets and, other manual methods to combine it. So when we do an audit, the majority of our time is actually in that kind of data collection that then you hand over to that assessor, that auditor, and they're going to be checking against the compliance. As much as you can automate and speed up that data collection, that really helps with reducing the overall audit time. And the longer that time takes, obviously, the more costly that audit's going to be. So what a CNAPP does in essence, if I boil it down, is it really helps to gather that raw data needed by the assessors, by the C3PAOs, right? Your CMMC third party assessors, so that they can have what they need to do to make the assessment as to whether or not you are compliant or consistent or whatever language you want to use against CMMC or really actually any other type of heavily regulated audit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so what type of raw data is that going to be? Well, you have the ability within a good CNAPP to understand, hey, what type of benchmarks are you consistent against? Think of it like your STIGs, your CIS benchmarks, et cetera. It's going to look for misconfigurations. What vulnerabilities are present, from a CVE standpoint, but also KEV, right? So the difference between just a critical vulnerability and a known exploitable vulnerability, and being able to flesh that out, because obviously a KEV is a much higher risk, and being able to pull out, your software build materials kind of on demand. So you can say, this is what I have deployed. And then you can get really sophisticated and say, actually, this is what I have deployed and actually what's in runtime. So it's not just that, oh, I have this Linux machine with this operating system with these components, but actually this is what's running, this is what's not running, which can help if there's a known vulnerability and that software provider hasn't provided the patch yet. We've actually had customers tell us, because I asked them, well, how much are you doing like the 171 framework yourself and going through it? So I don't touch any of that. What I did was just took the data that you collected through the CNAPP system, and I handed that over to my assessor. And then I had to do a couple other process documentations, because there's always things that no software is ever going to discover, like, hey, are you training your people, et cetera, et cetera. Those things fall outside of what we can discover out of an automated tool. They said, yeah, I just kind of combined those things and was able to pass my audit. So that is what gets me excited as someone who went through an 18-month audit within the government. Uh, um, is, hey, we can really take that burden off, and if you don't have to go through and manually, kind of coalesce that data together, you could be a much happier person.
Well, yeah, I mean, the audit is is all the worry and is all the rage. But when it comes to CMMC or, like you said, any regulated audit, when it comes to
Right.
prove it to me, visibility is huge, as you said, and being able to show how and what and where is enormous. Before my next question, which ties into kind of what you were just saying, I do want to highlight a couple things. So first off, probably should have made this disclaimer on the front end, but we in no way, shape, or form are financially or connected any way between Wiz and
Right.
QuickTrack and Beryllium, right?
Yes.
So this is just information from Wiz and from Bryan. I am super jealous of your guys' marketing because I know, I know some of those people from previous lives, and I just appreciate how you guys do it. And if you are not somebody who knows who Wiz is or doesn't follow Wiz on social media, LinkedIn, their website, please do. And anytime you guys are at a conference, it's just so innovative and I love it. But yeah, so I just want to make sure people know that we're not sitting here reselling Wiz or anything crazy like that. This is a really cool technology. You and I had a chance to catch up at a conference here just not too long ago in the DC area. And it was cool to be able to see the things that you could show and walk through. And you presented, I think, during a lunch session or something, and it was great. Yeah, so thank you for getting to that, because the next question that I'm going to have, which is probably what most listeners are going to have, is where do you feel the most important part of what you guys are doing, and those that are trying to achieve and get ready, not just start is one thing, but also preparing for that audit. And with something like Wiz, where do you see that most important part for a company from a CMMC perspective is?
Yeah, and I'll try to answer this as kind of non, you have to go out and buy Wiz as possible, right? Because really, what I want to do is just make sure people are aware. Hey, look, this technology exists. You should be researching this technology, and you should be making sure you're investing in a solution like it. Great if you come and want to see a demo from Wiz. Absolutely. I think, if it's permissible, I can give you a link for people to follow up with us. But the reality is if nothing else you take away from this, you should be taking away that you want to be defensible as possible in your methodology for securing your environment. So that's not defensible as in like, yeah, we have, people on the perimeter, actively, like, I don't know, in hoodies and on the keyboard, and, like, here's all of our firewalls and everything like that. It's defensibility in you say, look, we are following best practices. We are doing proper security. We are prioritizing our remediation. And I can prove that to you by showing you how we're approaching it. And so as much as possible as you can make that transparent, that is going to go a long way. So auditors, if they very quickly get confidence that you are approaching things in a way that is logical and makes sense and is consistent with best practices, they're not going to drill as hard because, they're just as busy as you are. And so the quicker they can get through an audit with the confidence that what they are auditing is an accurate representation, because obviously they don't want to pass someone and then later on find out that person was not doing what they were supposed to be doing, because that looks bad on the auditor as well. So as much as you can give them that confidence, the quicker and easier things are going to go. So being able to say, because what's CMMC about? It's CUI boundary, right? Uncontrolled and classified information. Well, with a good CNAPP, you can actually discover what data is out there, and you can actually kind of customize the data scan and say, yep, based upon my contracts that I have, here's the type of CUI data that the government's told me that they're sending me. If you're lucky enough and you actually have that information. I've scanned my environment, and here's where it actually is. Here are all the systems that laterally connect to these data. Therefore, that's my CMMC boundary. You can defend that very, very well. So why aren't you including this other system? Well, see, there is no logical connection. It is not in boundary. That gives you audit scope reduction. That's cost reduction right off the bat. And then something that you can then take with you. And that taking with you is also something that's really important. So what do I mean by that? And I'll try to do it as quickly as possible. I'm a long-winded individual. One of the issues that I've heard is, and some of the things that have blown my mind, and I get it. Like, I'm a NIST junkie. I get excited when a new special publication comes out. I get a bowl of popcorn. I'm sit down. It's like, that's what I'm doing. It's evening, and I know I'm weird, but most people aren't like that. And so what I've learned is several organizations, when I've asked them about, well, how are you in compliance with this or that? They say, we don't do any of that. We outsource all of it. We don't understand it. We don't have the people who are experts in it. And so we rely upon the assessor. And what you end up coming in some ways is locked into that accreditor, because at that point, they're the ones who've built that defensibility that you are following things the way that you're supposed to be following. So now you're kind of locked into that contract with them. So if instead you can, as much as possible, take ownership of your ability to present that you are compliant, that you have, a defensible boundary for CMMC for based upon the CUI data, that you can on demand be able to show what vulnerabilities you have, et cetera, even if you're not a cybersecurity expert, that's going to give you a lot more independence from a third party. It prevents you from being in a situation where they kind of hold it over you. Well, look, we are the ones who have accredited your system. If you leave, you're starting from scratch, et cetera, et cetera. And unfortunately, that's as much a part of what we're looking at as the actual reducing the risk in the environment, because time is money. The more you have to go back and go through another assessment, the the longer time it's going to be before you're going to be able to go out and bid on these contracts.
You're right. Time is money. That's a big factor, not just in the ecosystem that we live day to day. Same thing, NIST junkies, but yeah, it really does come down to it. The efficiency shouldn't just come down to it's easy and just come down to try to automate as much as possible. But you do need to find that balance. And you're right. With what you guys are doing and how it's applied, goes a long ways on alleviating any of that doubt. Like you said, kind of buying down that risk. So, well, this is great. This has been a really cool topic, and we will drop your link in the description and on all the channels that people will see this on. But for the listeners who might be making dinner or sitting at their desk, what do you prefer people do if they want to both reach out to you specifically, follow along somewhere, or get in contact with Wiz when it comes to seeing more?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me. Right. So if those who are listening, last name is Rosensteel. It's Romeo Oscar Sierra Echo November Sierra Tango Echo Echo Lima. There's not a lot of Rosensteels out there. So if you search for Rosensteel, you look for Bryan Rosensteel on LinkedIn.
Brian with a
You're
Y.
going to find me.
Brian with a Y also
that's
helps.
correct.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I just assume people know how to spell Bryan correctly.
Yeah, I get that with Derek a lot too, because a lot of people put extra letters in for no reason. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, no, there's a whole within the community of Brian's debate between is it an I or a Y. But and then from a Wiz perspective, search for Wiz at our website, wiz.io. You can find many ways of actually getting a request for a demo, and also being able to reach out to us and get in touch with someone pretty quickly, and then we can walk you through it and walk you through things beyond what we talked a lot about compliance today, which is really important, and it's what I think a lot of people are very concerned with. But more importantly, really understanding, hey, this compliance is only coming as a result of actually doing some pretty sophisticated risk remediation based upon prioritized risk. I always say when you get the fundamentals correct, compliance and everything else tends to come along with it. So we'd love to actually show your audience that, if they're interested, and really encourage them to follow up.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. And I highly encourage people to do that as well. Well, thank you. We will make sure that that information's all laid out for people. And if you're watching on YouTube, then you can also see how Brian's name is spelled. But I just with the last name Rosensteel, I feel like we need a sounder next time you're on. That's just like, bam, Rosensteel. Because I just think it's just such a great name. Okay, cool. Well, from here, we'll have you on again for sure. Thank you again for your time. For those that do frequent the podcast or care about what's going on in the world with us, do look for us at an event coming up at the end of February. We're going to be in Tampa at an event called Cuick. And a little spoiler there, the Cuick 10 podcast will be making an appearance, and so we'll have some fun down there. Otherwise, as always, you can visit quicktrack.com, subscribe to the podcast, check out our newsletter. Same thing, if you want to hear more about what we do and ways that we can direct you towards Wiz, if it seems like that's something that's going to solve a problem for you, we are happy to do so. And again, Brian, thank you for the time, sir, and we will be in touch and have you on here maybe towards the later part of the year to see how things are going.
Sure. Hey, Derek, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and make sure to subscribe to the Cuick 10 podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and check us out on YouTube as well. For more information about Trac, visit our website at www.cuicktrac.com. That's CUICKTRAC.com.